In order to investigate the visual relationship between fascism and homoeroticism, I here look at the figurative and architectural representations of masculinity of three historically militarized nations: Germany, Italy, and Israel. Common in these depictions of the state's body are rugged masculine features that inevitably reference the iconography of ancient Greek and Roman civilizations, these states to some extent identified as ancestral. Fascism, the mass gathering of people into a solidified, militarized body, requires a complex set of symbols and mechanisms of social control in order to remain a viable and intoxicating national agenda. Requiring a delicate balance of phantic and erotic energy, the fascist state must be both destructive and virile, able to conquer external opposition while successfully reproducing internal values, myths, and ultimately produce new citizens. Eros, the libidinal energy identified by Freud and later expanded upon by Marcuse, is the life force, the backbone of harmonious social relations. Controlling the placement of these energy, controlling desire, is just as important for a totalitarian state as is controlling thanatos, the death instinct. If thantic energy is to be focused outward, erotic energy is thus focused inward, the personified state practicing continual self-love as a form of cultural reproduction. What then are the implications for a patriarchal society, wherein the privileged male must sacrifice their personal desire to subordinate themselves to a masculinized state, and what role does visuality play in the maintenance of this relationship? First, we must understand these images to be propaganda. Cultural production within the fascist state is heavily controlled, and only those artists and works that support and glorify the state's values are allowed to be showcased. German sculptor Arno Breker, Italian architect Enrico Del Debbio, and Zionist iconographer E.M. Lillian all use the uncovered, erotically charged male form to represent the needs and desires of the state and to impress the body cult of all three regimes used to mobilize their populations. Soldiers must be comfortable, celebratory of their physical form and vitality, without crossing the line into openly erotic worship among themselves, namely homosexual activity. The Nazi regime notoriously ratcheted up institutional punishments for confirmed homosexual activity, including castration and execution, both as a reaction to a rise in homosexual practice among segregated male soldiers and to justify the escalating slaughters of homosexuals from the imagined lower races. The Italian regime, still deeply opposed to homosexual practice, took the opposite route, not addressing homosexuality legislatively to create the illusion it was not practiced, much as exists in contemporary China. The developing Zionist regime, with its focus on the robust, productive muscle Jew, took a similarly critical stance on homosexual practice, as it did not increase the numbers of the population or combat the effeminized status implanted by other contemporary fascist regimes on Jews. Reproduction, both cultural and physical, is a fundamental concern for the fascist state. In a patriarchal society, the state takes on masculine qualities, a masculine body. The phallus, the organ of power and productivity, can be seen as the men within the society. They stand in for the absent phallus of the state, itself a fetish, and must then characterize in their own bodies the needs and desires of this socially created entity. We can see how phallic imagery shows up even here in statistics. German national output is graphically compared to competitors in 1935. It is not too much of a stretch to identify these as phalluses, a graphical comparison of state masculinity. So when is the phallus displayed, literally or figuratively, for erotic versus social purposes? First, let's define homoeroticism and separate the term from homosexuality. Homoeroticism is the depiction of same-sex sensuality or intimacy of desire. Homoeroticism is an active visual process, privileging the male gaze. The homoerotic relationship doesn't have to exist within the depiction. Rather, it can exist between the subject and the object, the viewer and the image. In order not to incorrectly decode historical images by current understandings of sexuality, we must look at the roots of the term homosexual, curiously enough originating in pre-war Germany. The term homosexual itself must be historicized both as an illness and as an identifier before the current state of affairs can be fully comprehended. A term invented by Karl Heinrich Ulrichs, a German psychologist and activist. His term Urnig, a male-bodied person with a female psyche, shows that despite Ulrich's progressive intention, he instantly links same-sex desire with inverted gender roles, and inadvertently effeminizing the male subject. Karl Maria Kerntby, a Hungarian journalist and civil rights activist, was in conversation with Ulrich, and the writer's tome Homosexualität appeared in one of their correspondences in 1868. The term was politicized by Kerntby to have Prussian anti-sodomy laws lifted, arguing that this behavior was not deviant but inherent, and that the state should not be allowed to intervene in citizens' private lives, whether or not these practices were normal or unpopular. Note Kerntby's indifference to the origin of homosexuality. Rather, he's concerned with its legitimate practice. Kerntby and Ulrich publicly clashed over the further politicization of their views. Ulrich's effeminate earning movement can be contrasted with Kerntby's. The cultivation of the fascist, the sculpting of the mind and body, was reinforced by the visual representations that were commissioned in Germany, Italy, and early Zionist discourse. The youth, here explicitly male, must be transformed into the tightly designed model of comradeship without solely placing their erotic desire on the male form. Training camps and educational programs designed to produce uniform ideal citizens mirrored the pedagogical practices of ancient Greece, sans the acknowledgement of institutional pederasty associated with Greek aristocratic education. The family is displaced by the state. Young soldiers must be separated from their mothers and the family unit to reach their full potential as state agents, or organs. Thus, love for the state is a male-focused adoration, expressed in labor and combat. Guns, hammers, and other phallic tools replace the visible erection, and this visual displacement can be seen as an attempt to channel libidinous energies into the service of the state rather than familial reproduction. A most curious image of fascist reproduction is E.M. Lillian's Birth of Man, which depicts Zionist founder Theodore Herzl approaching a young angelic boy whose wings are being spread by other men of Herzl's stature. Does this suggest homosexual reproduction? Is it the fascist who must dominate the individual male, depicted as a youth, in service to the state? Is this image somehow related to the pederastic education of privileged Greek youth? The grandeur and beauty of the body suggest whatever is about to happen is not only beautiful, but somehow natural, an essential part of organizing male bodies under the fascist apparatus. It's important to note, however, that not all fascist imagery has to be explicitly figurative or erotic in nature. As we can see in our own country, phallic imagery pervades memorialization, and the notion of reproduction in relationship to the state, with a focus on masculinity, is just as strong in World War II as it is today.